Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I am Nick Scheist, and you may remember me from the Scheist Podcast and Bad Movies We Love.
And I'm Seth Vargas of the Movie Friends Podcast.
And we decided to join forces, a team up, if you will, because X-Men 97 was so good, we just couldn't help ourselves.
That's right. So join us as we discuss our personal history with the comics, the films, and the collectible trading cards of the X-Men universe.
And, of course, the catalyst for it all, X-Men 97. To me, my ex-friends. Seth, it's good to see you, buddy.
Hey, Nick, how are you?
I don't know how either of us found and dedicated time to do a whole brand new show just on the X-Men cartoon.
It's just that good. It's that important.
It is, I think. I mean, really, a lot of people loved it. And I think, I've seen a lot of sentiment that I would echo here in that it's not just that the show is good and nostalgic, which it is those things, but it way over delivers on sort of what fans of the original cartoon series would expect. The original cartoon series was good, but was like afternoon cartoon television for kids. But then in taking on this project and bringing it back for the purposes of sort of reigniting the X-Men fires in general and sort of getting the ball rolling for the X-Men moving into the MCU and getting those live action projects started, like this had to be more than just nostalgia. And I feel like it way over delivers. And I think it was David Grabinski that had said it's like you went in to get a sandwich and ended up getting served like a 6-course meal. And I think that's a good way to put it because, these episodes, each of them are very robust. They're all tackling a lot of X-Men issues at once. And one of the things that struck me was sort of how much ground they're covering in a short period of time. And I don't know if that was designed to be that way because, hey, we don't know if this is getting renewed for a season 2. We know we were tasked with sort of getting things back up to par so that we could jump into live action X-Men. But we have to sort of put our best foot forward and make sure that we're getting through a lot of X-Men content in a hurry. And I'm seeing like many, many storylines unfolding over the course of just a 10-episode season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is just me, but I think 10 episodes is a great season length. There's not too much spinning of the wheels here. I enjoyed the whole monster of the week kind of episodic thing while they're still unfolding the longer story. And if you make this 21 episodes, I feel like there'd be some that you could kind of take or leave, where with this one, it's boom, 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 boom. You need all of them. They all play into the same story. And I remember, the original show quite fondly as a child. I believe we're around the same age.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to turn 40 this year. So I know
very
you're
nice.
Close. You're in your 30s.
Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah. I'll be 36, so a little bit younger, but in the early to mid 90s, the X-Men were like the coolest comic property to me, at least. You had the iconic trading cards that everyone thought, they were going to save forever.
I still have them.
And retire on one day.
Well, yeah, that's not going to happen, but I do have them.
Yeah. And so it was cool. I'm not a super big nostalgia person. I think that sequels and prequels and remakes, all of those things, it's part of the history of Hollywood. There have been remakes since movies have been made, right? So I don't view them as like a scourge on the planet like some people do. But when they announced this one, I was like, okay, maybe. I don't really know what the purpose of this is, but I was very pleasantly surprised. And honestly, the thing that it did for me the most was kind of cement in my head that these stories might best be told in a hand drawn format. Like maybe superheroes work best when it's not a person flying around on the screen.
Yeah, no, you make a great point because one of the things that is so fantastic about the show is the way that the action is portrayed, and
Hmm.
you don't have to rely on some guy on strings to fly across the screen. You don't have to rely on a cable for like an explosion to yank somebody out of the room. And so
Hmm.
you don't have to worry about any of the practical effects and how those translate well or don't translate well on
Right.
screen in some cases. So I think you really get to max out the excuse me, the enjoyability of watching these characters on screen. And that for me was the fun part. And I think especially in comparison to the films, which, for the most part, I like all the films. I've seen them
Yeah.
all more than once, I think, except for Dark Phoenix, which is the final entry in the X-Men film franchise, I think, at the time.
Yeah. Well, New Mutants,
Yes, sorry, New Mutants came.
kind of. poor, poor New Mutants. It's an island unto itself.
That movie had so much potential, and
I know.
it seems
I
like it
know.
didn't want to stay the course. Like they sold it as this is going to be a horror movie with mutants, and then it was like, yes, but we're also going to like really pump the brakes on that and try to make
Hmm.
it more of an X-Men film. But the New Mutant comic series that is currently running is very good, and a lot of
Mm,
the New Mutant comic books that have run over the course of the last like 40 years or so have been very good.
yeah.
You get some great characters out of that.
So I wanted to ask you just before we begin our X-Men journey together, what has been your introduction and experience with the X-Men?
So, like you, I was at that prime age for the 90s X Men comic run, which then became super popular, launched the TV series, launched the exclusive trading card series. And for people that like are not familiar with how that worked, like Marvel had already complete trading card series that were alive and well. It was like their primary line of comics, just like they have the primary line of cards, just like they have comics, where you buy the collector set, you have all the characters in the Marvel universe. But then X-Men became a property that was so popular unto itself that it demanded its own trading card series where it was just the characters of the X-Men. And then you start to realize how many mutants there are, how many characters exist within just the X-Men universe. And I think that's a big part of the reason why it appealed to so many people and became so popular because it's not like, oh, here's Captain America. Either you like this one character or you don't. And then if you don't like this character, you're not into the Captain America stories. And like Spider Man, Black Panther, Hulk, a lot of these standalone characters all sort of teeter on that same fine line. The idea is
Hmm.
that most people will like these characters and understand them and get behind them, but there isn't anything to latch onto if you don't. And with the
Right.
X Men, it's like, hey, this isn't your favorite character, but this is. And the fact that they're a team, I think, really lent itself to something that I like in particular, which is team building and teamwork. It's why I really like latch on to team sports and understand how
Mm,
hard it is to win long term in team sports because you have to make short term decisions about like what's best for the team, who's going to be like on the starting lineup. You have to make long term investment decisions and like who you're scouting, how you do go about recruiting. And the X Men does all of that. Like Charles
right.
Xavier has to go to your house and say, "Hey Seth, I noticed you have a penchant for podcasting and we really need a podcaster on the team and we can help you hone your podcasting skills if you come to the X Mansion." So, I think it just lined up really well with stuff that I already enjoyed and it gave me a different way to enjoy those things.
You just made me feel so bad for Charles Xavier. Not only not only is he burdened with like the piece of the entire planet, he's running to school and he's also a talent scout.
Yeah.
Give this guy a break.
Well, that's what Cerebro's for. He's, listening to your podcast from afar, and then he just pops over to your house on Blackbird.
Right. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. So yeah, then like the trading cards obviously happened, and then there was a little bit of like a downswing because like I was in high school, so I wasn't in my prime book collecting, card collecting mentality anymore. I was interested in some other things. I still like the X-Men. The movies, I think the first one came out in what, 2000, so
2000.
right in the middle of high school, which sort of rejuvenated that. And then
Hmm.
because of that movie, I forget what the studio was, but there was an Xbox game, which was X-Men Legends.
Legends. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that game is amazing. And if you
yeah.
really like all the things that the X-Men do, and you like the teamwork, and you like the action, and you like the superpowers, and you like the storylines, X-Men Legends is great. You get to do all that. You take all your love for X-Men and you get to actually physically play it. And that was like a huge boost to my rejuvenation of being an X-Men fan. And then there was, of course,
Mm.
X-Men Legends 2, which came later. They continued making movies. Um, that game ultimately, well, that game eventually became Marvel Ultimate Alliance. So basically, the same
Yep.
skeleton turned it more into like an Avengers game instead of an X-Men game. But that I think catalyzed like a new generation of X-Men fans. And then so from, 2000 until I want to say 2019, when the new comic series launched, which was House of X and Powers of X, starts a new storyline where the X-Men are basically independent. They finally all agreed. All the mutants have basically agreed to like, we're all on the side of mutant kind. We have a mutant island that we
Hmm.
now all inhabit. And it became sort of Game of Thrones with mutants. So a lot of like inner working politics, but tons and tons of characters, some great character design. And it really set the stage for, I think, an interesting future for the X-Men to exist similarly to what we start to see with Genosha in this show. It's like the idea of
Yeah.
Genosha, but taken to the next logical conclusion. And so, yeah, that brought us sort of to here. Dark Phoenix was, like I said, the last one that I watched. I saw that like in IMAX on opening weekend though, so like I
Wow.
was I was
Wow.
still pretty hardcore about it at the time.
Sure.
Never went back and watched that one again. But since then, it's just sort of been waiting for eventually what is going to happen. And when I heard that they were rejuvenating and revamping and bringing back the X-Men cartoon show, I was excited because I loved the cartoon show and I wasn't 100% sure what this was going to be. And then when I saw it, I was like, holy crap. Is it possible that they actually made something based on nostalgia that was better than the original property ever was?
Right.
Because I feel like that's the thing that is missing from nostalgic cash grabs is that we're going to use the property, we're going to use characters that and all we want to do is really get your butt in the seat and collect money from the ticket sale. We're not
Right.
really interested in making this a better product than what existed before it. And fortunately, the original X-Men cartoon, while has its strengths for sure, it has a lot of weaknesses as well. And so I think it was just like really fertile soil to actually pick a project to start rebuilding this brand and sort of refamiliarizing people with who the X-Men are and why so many people love them for so long, why this was Marvel's flagship property. The X-Men brand was the one that like sort of started the new wave of comic book film adaptations
Yep.
for modern day.
Yeah, which is very odd to try to remember. You're a kid in 1998 and you hear they're going to make an X-Men movie?
Mhm.
And I remember as a kid hearing that they were going to make a Lord of the Rings movie and an X-Men movie, and I was just like, there's there's no way. Like that's impossible because it wasn't. Yes, it was part of culture and pop culture, and you knew everybody knew Superman and Batman, and it wasn't completely out of the norm to be walking around town and see a Superman shirt or something like that. But some of the other comic titles, they only existed in comic book stores and in your bedroom and in your comic boxes. And for them to enter the mainstream through a major blockbuster film, that just felt like such an impossibility. where I think people who were born in 2000 or 2000, I mean, geez Louise, we're in 2024 now. So mid 2000s, there are 18-year-olds walking around who've grown up in this world where everybody knows who all of these characters are. I always said how odd it was that people know who like Thanos is. Like
Yeah.
very, very, very strange. So for them to kind of go back to before all of the films started, like for Marvel, uh, it seems like we're starting to enter the day before the day when they start rebooting Captain America and all of the major film franchises that we've had. So for them to start kind of before the films started with X-Men, the cartoon show, it's pretty interesting. And like you said, I do feel that they improved on it. Nostalgia's a heck of a thing, but if you go back, oftentimes you might find you were just a little kid who was really excited to see X-Men on screen, and it was fun and cool. But like you said, there was limitations, and in what I feel they do perhaps the best, and maybe it's just because I'm so excited to be watching superheroes not as humans. uh the the camera, the way that the camera moves, the way that the scenes are blocked, especially the action scenes.
Yeah.
In the first episode, Cyclops is like blasting the ground to kind of like shoot himself around the battlefield.
Fantastic introduction for him.
It's so it's so cool. And this is the last time I'll mention this, but when it's animated, you don't look at it and say, "Oh, that looks cheap," or "Oh, that looked fake," because it's all fake.
Yeah.
You don't have to ever bring realism into it. And because these are fantastical scenarios and characters, them not being bound to realism, you can just have fun. Like I can just watch this and be like, "Oh my god, this is Gambit is charging up Wolverine. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life." You know?
Yeah, and it plays into sort of like all of the things that are the X-Men strengths, like the teamwork, the action,
Mm-hmm.
the villains
Mm-hmm.
they fight, the sort of scale on which their stories matter overall to the world and to the Marvel universe, because there's so many different tie-ins that have happened where it's like, hey, the X-Men story is going on, but then like, yeah, there's other players that have to come into this story because it is so big. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's I I thought as I was sitting there watching this, I get to watch this awesome like nostalgia freight train cartoon for research purposes
Sure,
last
yeah.
night, and like it's a wonderful day.
So, should we talk about episode 1?
Yeah, let's talk about episode 1. I will say I misspoke slightly in that like the X-Men is not the first franchise to be born from the comic books. There's obviously Batman, Superman, Blade. There's
Oh, yeah.
I think there's an earlier Hulk and Spider-Man movie, but the
Sure,
X-Men
I mean,
is
the Hulk
like
TV show for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, the X-Men sort of switched the tone from a little bit more like campy Tim Burton style where there's a little bit more humor involved to like a serious, we're all wearing black leather. We're taking the idea of the X-Men being in the real world fairly
Yeah.
seriously, and that kind of
Mhm.
changed the trajectory for what the MCU would be after that.
Mhm. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, now that we're out of the way with that, episode 1,
Well, Professor X is dead.
he's gone. So
Mhm.
I went back and watched actually the final episode of the original cartoon to
Nice.
see how closely it was tied in. And it is a direct sequel. It picks up a year later based on the events of the final episode of the original run of the show, which ended in 96. So it makes sense that this is X-Men 97. I
Yep.
didn't realize they had adhered that closely to what they were trying to do with the story, but they did, and we start with Professor X being gone. and the X-Men having to sort of work in the vacuum of leadership and what that means for all of the students of Professor X and sort of like the inherent power struggle that's going to come with that a little bit. But, when I put this episode on for the first time, I'm hesitant because I don't know what I'm getting into. And then the music hits the
Oh
da-da-da-da-da-da.
yeah.
I'm like, holy shit, they did it. They kept the music and they updated it and it sounds amazing. And they updated the entire like title card sequence to look
Hmm.
exactly the same as the
Yep.
original series. And they just updated it with the characters that they needed in those spots. The animation is way cleaner. And I'm like, holy crap, we're like I'm rocking with this already. So the bar is high now because I didn't think you guys were going to have the stones to really, be all in on this, and they were. So they drop us right back in to the mutant world, and we're seeing the first thing I think we see is the persecution of mutants. So
Yep.
we're going back to like the core identity of the X-Men and hey, this is a persecuted class of people. Humanity does not like them to the point where we've already got control collars. We're already at the point where sort of militia groups are banking on advanced weapon technology to combat mutants. And the X-Men are sort of advanced rescue team of sorts, kind of like
Mm,
in Predator, where Arnold's team, like, yes, they're all
sure.
military trained and they're all like jacked on steroids, probably. They all have gigantic guns, but really they're like, no, we're a rescue team. We don't get into the messy stuff. And so that's
Hmm.
kind of how the X-Men function here. And yes, we get this great Cyclops intro that you mentioned where you sort of see the display of his abilities in a way that has not been functionally well told yet in the cinematic history. So, he's just using it essentially as a jetpack to move around
Yeah.
the room, which sort of it looks like it's a little bit low power, but I think in that scene too, we get to see like he gets his goggles ripped off, he blows up the entire floor of the building. I mean, realistically, probably liquefy all of the human beings in that room at the
It-
same time, which they don't show us, but
yeah. 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 Yeah.
but it's a good intro to a character who had been sort of forgotten by the movies, who had become the punching bag for Wolverine and just this
Hmm.
afterthought. And it's like he's the leader of the X-Men. He's an important character, even if you don't agree with him, like on his strategy or his politics. Like Cyclops is the leader of the X-Men for a reason, and I think that is put into the forefront of this show with a lot of intention.
Absolutely. And it was very refreshing to see him, fighting like a gymnast. He's not just standing in the corner of the room, like
Yeah.
camping, right? Which, quite frankly, if I were Cyclops, I would not be ripped.
Yeah, I'd be fat, lazy Cyclops.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be like, why do I need to leave my, like, I don't need to exercise. What are you kidding me? But he's fighting people on a street level, punching dudes, blasting dudes. It's very cool. And I appreciated how, like what you already said, we're coming into this as if this is the first episode of a series, and so we're introducing all of these important elements, including the Sentinels. But it's not just that they're fighting Sentinels; it's that people, this militia group, basically the Friends of Humanity, have acquired Sentinel technology, and there's, I think, definitely real world applications to a lot of the politics in this season, which is we're not just fighting like, ooh, the evil, Bolivar Trask and his big old machines.
Mhm.
It starts here and then we'll cover it later on, but it evolves into no, the Sentinels are now kind of everywhere and the technology can be utilized by everyone, And so how do you hide a Sentinel? You can't, but you can hide individual people, and it makes it makes them less like a military weapon and more like terrorism. And it's very interesting. It's very, very, and it's a cool direction to take like the whole Sentinel storyline because I've never really understood the threat of the Sentinels. Like, yes, I understand they are, highly specified to track and murder mutants. And then every time the X-Men fight them, they just rip them all to shreds.
Yeah, the Sentinels in the show typically just get wrecked on
Yeah,
a
and
regular
so,
basis.
but the specter over this season, and especially these first 2 episodes, is Charles Xavier's philosophy. And so the philosophy is that which like binds their hands to not just smash and destroy everyone who fights against them. So if the Sentinels aren't, you know, faceless robots with no feelings, but they are humans, which the X-Men are sworn to protect and coexist with, it's genius. Like that's really, really good writing. And I think that's a good example of how this kind of surpasses, the original while still honoring it. Like, you still get to blow up Sentinels.
Yeah, and I think, with if you look at something like Ninja Turtles, for example, right? They were always fighting
Sure.
the Foot Clan. The Foot Clan is robots. Robots are easily disposable victims of excessive violence, and it's always okay. It's like robots, zombies, and Nazis. Like no matter what you do
Yep.
to those three, it's pretty much fair game all the time.
Yep.
And I think one of the more interesting things that seems to be a central working point of like this show's thesis is not just the existence of Sentinels, but like the systems that allowed something like that
Mm.
to exist. And then we see here there's like a militia group, and we've seen a lot in recent years of the rise of militia
Yeah.
groups. Like, so I think it's tapping into something that is very, very true to humanity's nature. And when you and I had sort of like jokingly talked about Waterworld and like why do the humans in Waterworld not want mutant Mariner to be on their
Right.
team? And sort of I pose that question to you, like, do you really think humanity is on the side of mutants? And I think here that is the main part of the equation. Like, is coexistence possible? If it is possible, what do those terms look like? And it's something that is explored really well in the new comic series, because with the X-Men having their own mutant island, their own nation, and having access to a lot of basically technology and medicine, it makes them a main power player politically within the world. And so like there's sprinklings of that here. But I like that we have like Guy Ritchie who took this act against Xavier. We have this Sentinel program that doesn't just develop in the shadows, right? These are gigantic robots that require like major manufacturing. Like even if
Mm-hmm.
you're going to build a master mold, like you need some facility to do that. So there's no way that this stuff was all just done in secret by some like closeted psychotic
Right.
billionaire, right? Like Batman doesn't build Sentinels to fight his battles for him because Batman doesn't have like the bat facility where he
Right.
manufactures all these things. He's got to work exclusively within the confines of being a secret identity superhero. And so you get these guys that are the villains that are basically politicians that are like, okay, well, now this is going to be my political movement is very anti-mutant, and I'm going to be public about that. But then in the shadows, I'm going to work with all of my private military arms contractors to start developing this weaponry that is going to be central in the roundup and execution of this class of people.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember if it was Guy Ritchie in this episode or Trask in a different episode, but they say basically your existence is a reminder that we are on our way out. And that's paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Guy Ritchie is the one who says tolerance is extinction.
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean it's tough. I think that we feel that well, I don't feel that because I'm 50% Mexican, but we've all read, the studies that by 2050 or something like that, white people in America won't be the majority anymore. And you hear that for the first time several years ago, and it's like, oh, okay. But you can see how that idea is fearful for
Mm-hmm.
some people, and how they're like, well, wait, as we get closer to that, I might not like that reality. Now, me, Seth Vargas, is not saying that. I am quoting a fearful racist person that does not exist. Well, they do exist, but I just don't know who their name is. But you can see this idea, and you know, to bring it back to the real world, when the guys were marching with torches chanting, "You will not replace us," right?
Hmm.
You can see how, if there were people in real life who had superpowers, and they were becoming more prevalent and more powerful, and they were having their own spaces and agency, how the response wouldn't be like, "Oh, thank goodness our saviors are here." It would be, "Oh, we are being replaced." And so, while this is a comic book and a cartoon show, it feels, I think if you can meet this on its level, it doesn't feel super fun all the time. Like, there's cool stuff, but
Yeah.
a lot of those ideas, tolerance is extinction, that sounds like it's ripped straight from, someone's ideology that you could easily find on YouTube right now.
Oh yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of it out there on YouTube if you were to really look for it.
Hmm.
And you probably wouldn't even have to look that hard, to be honest. You'd probably accidentally stumble across it if you're on YouTube long enough. But
Well,
yeah,
it's my fault for typing extinction, tolerance is extinction into the YouTube search bar.
oh, the
Yeah.
algorithm knows you now.
Yeah, I brought that on myself.
Um, I think an interesting part of that discussion and that dynamic in particular is that this show is written to continue a story that ended in 1996, but it has the
Mm,
benefit of 30 years almost of history and
yeah.
knowledge to pull from in writing that story. So it doesn't get to be sort of like prescient and forecasting in the way that the previous X-Men comics sort of were aiming to be, but that's always been a core part of the X-Men is talking about this like intolerance towards mutants, and that was
Yeah.
always coming from a place of like real human existence. And
Yeah.
so I think this one, where this show starts, it's sort of just punched up, peppered by the fact that we've had 30 years since the end of 1996 to really see that probably we've gone in the opposite direction to what the X-Men were working for ideally in the 90s. So like you have
Yeah.
this representation of this team of X-Men who I think Magneto says it. I don't know if it's in the first episode or not because he just shows up at the end, but he ends up saying basically this team of mutants like just fights to protect people that fucking hate them.
Hmm.
And so, like, that is the core identity of what the X-Men are. Even though they're hated, they still do the right thing because that's
Hmm.
the people that Charles Xavier raised to follow that mission. And, I think when the show was originally made in the 90s and that X-Men run was really popular, you're sort of like pushing that narrative of like Charles's ideal is the way to go, right? Like,
Hmm.
this is coexistence, friendship, collaboration, all the things that Charles wants seem to be the good thing. And then, now we have 30 years in between, but we're telling the story right after Charles is gone. And we start to hear a lot of Magneto's politics. And Magneto's politics, I'm like, I can't disagree with a lot of what Magneto is saying
Yeah.
because he just wants to look out for his people. That's episode 2 stuff, but
Right.
we will get into that.
Yeah.
I want to just peel it back to episode 1 a little bit in that we get really great character introductions, right?
Hmm.
So there's a whole new generation of people who are going to watch this that have never seen the original X-Men cartoon, that
Hmm.
maybe haven't even seen the movies. There might be a whole generation of kids that
Sure.
are raised on this as their first introduction to the X-Men on screen. And it's a fantastic introduction, but also the bar is like insanely high now. I'm like, wow, how do you now continue to tell these stories like past season 1, maybe branching out into the MCU? And how do you not, you know, have it be of this quality or better? And I also like that episode 1, like, it gives us great action, great character intros. We get them wrecking Sentinels, You have Wolverine getting charged up by Gambit, jumping off of Morphs, who apparently like Morph is one of the strongest X-Men, who
Yeah.
he was just like a
Yeah.
throwaway character in the original series. He like turns into a trampoline as Blob, and then Wolverine just decapitates Master Mold in one swing. So it's like they just walk through Master Mold and the Sentinels like they're
Yep.
not even a threat. But I think what I love about that, while it does sort of shorten the curve of that story, we get to see a group of adult X-Men that are fully confident in their abilities, which is not
Yeah.
something that we see a lot of in the movies, because the movies have been basically like kid-centric since the original trilogy. It moved towards, oh, there's kids, they're learning their powers. There's always somebody who kind of like wants to quit the team and not be an
Right.
X-Men that's like a wet
Right.
blanket. And then there's always this push and pull of like, you haven't quite achieved your destiny as a mutant. Like you haven't lived up to your full potential. And then in this, we see like a Cyclops who is the leader of the X-Men. He decapitates a Sentinel and cuts his hand off in one swing. And then they're all just falling to their death. You know, there's a
Yeah.
couple characters that can fly. Morph turns into Archangel and scoops up his boyfriend Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Rogue takes care of the rest. Storm can fly. Cyclops is just like plummeting to his death. He's like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll see you on the ground, team." And then it reverse thrusts his optic blast into the ground with such force that he lands like superhero landing perfectly clean. And it's like, holy fuck, where's this guy been in the
Yeah.
movies?
Yeah.
Totally
Well,
wasted James Marsden and these years of Cyclops.
and I love James Marsden.
Me too.
James Marsden is an underrated, comedic actor, which thankfully through Jury Duty people were able to see. But it is very refreshing. And I'm not here to like talk bad about all of the Marvel movies, but when, for example, Magneto walks in the room and says status report, he gets a status report. And when Cyclops gives a direction, people just listen. There's not like talking back and like power stroke. Like you said, it's not like, well, who's really in charge of this team, Wolverine or Cyclops? And yes, they're still contentious because there are high stakes and egos, but for the most part you get to see them function as a team and just get stuff done. And you can see how when they work as a team, yeah, it's like a Green Beret strike force or something like that. It's like they're actually competent and they get things done.
Yeah, it's one of their biggest strengths is that they all have different abilities, and it's their training and their teamwork and their commitment to each other that makes them such a formidable force, where the Avengers are mostly like individual heroes that are assembled
Mm,
into a team when the stakes are so high that there is no other choice. But the
right.
X-Men essentially always function as a team. I mean, there's times where like Wolverine is doing his own thing because that's what Wolverine does, but
Sure.
for the most part, like it's always team-based stories. It's always like family-centric stories.
Hmm.
And, part of me really, really wanted to see the Jean Grey and Scott on the run story. I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so she walks in pregnant. I'm like, oh wow, they're doing this in this story. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. And then, there's a lot of talk between the two of them are like, the X-Men is not a place to raise a baby. We need to get away from this. And part of me is like, I want that for them. Like, as characters that I care about, I want them to be able to walk away from this and not be drawn into the burden of like having to be the leader. But I mean, like, Scott has got a very complicated relationship, obviously, with Xavier. He's a little flummoxed at the end of this episode when he
Hmm.
realizes that he was not basically in the will
Yep.
as the heir apparent, as the leader of the X-Men. But like you said, you can see when he's in the field of combat, like you listen to Cyclops because he's a tactically brilliant guy. And that is why he's the leader. And, like you said, you see him fight hand to hand in this. And it's like he does that because he likes it. He's
Hmm.
a Taekwondo black belt. He's mastered a lot of martial arts. So he enjoys the hand to hand combat nature of it. And so when he doesn't feel like he's super threatened, he's going to go into close quarters and fight.
Right. Right. Yeah. And also because of his built-in compassion, he can probably hurt someone a lot less by
Yes.
chopping them in the throat than blasting them. But it's a cool thing that they do here where while I mentioned like the episodic nature of some of the beginnings of this season, they are putting in ideas that are ruminated on through multiple characters throughout the season. And here in the first one, it's this idea of when do we graduate, right? When Jean is making fun of Cyclops, she says, that he would say, what's the point of being an X-Men if we can't enjoy our lives? And we see that with multiple characters in multiple ways. This idea of when do we move on? Like, when is it okay to say the X-Men will be okay without me? And I like that Cyclops gets to think about things beyond the X-Men, and it's not all just, I'll be here forever and I'll do this forever. But yeah, Jean shows up pregnant. Gambit
Crop top Gambit.
Gambit is throwing a charged up beignet at Cyclops' face when she walks in, and she stops it. But what if she hadn't? What was the end game there with that beignet? Like, would he have caught it? Would he have blasted it? Like, that seemed real strange and dangerous. I was like, you're right in the kitchen,
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a very cavalier attitude to throw around an explosive.
Yeah.
But I'm sure this isn't the first time that they've had these sort of like little dust ups. I know there's a comic issue from the 90s run too, where Gambit throws a charged up pie in Bishop's face. It doesn't really do anything. It just hits him in the face and kind of like zaps him. But yeah, maybe there's some mutant resistance to energy in that way.
Sure.
I don't know. The
Sure.
Cyclops could blast it, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
He's Jean's there to handle that.
Right. So yeah, Jean is pregnant, and her and Scott talk about the future. And you get to see, I love anytime we see the X-Men just kind of goofing off and hanging around at home. And like you said, crop top Gambit and poor Rogue, who always has to be totally covered up wearing like a tank top over because sure, why not,
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are in uniform, like while they're just lounging at the house, and Rogue is one of them, and that might be a safety thing. But Gambit, as soon as he doesn't have to be in uniform, he's like, I'm showing off these abs that I've worked very hard on because I need Rogue to know that I'm trying over here.
Yes.
But we get a great Storm introduction in this episode too. You get Cyclops pitched in over the intercom. He's like, give him the forecast, and then like everything's giant tornado comes and sweeps up all the Sentinels. So we really get like this show of power from Storm in particular, and we get the words like Omega level threat detected from the Sentinel. So that like Storm is a heavy hitter, and honestly, the new run of the comic series has done a fantastic job with Storm and sort of like her legend building. She's essentially the X-Men's representative on Mars at the point where this happens. And she's had to fight off like ancient mutants that are sort of like from Apocalypse's bloodline era. And it's impressive because she's the only one. So she sits on this council of Mars as like the representative of Earth, basically. So Storm is fucking incredibly powerful. And she's awesome, and we get to see it here too. And I feel like all the characters got really great introductions here, so you didn't feel cheated. I mean, Beast gets to like rip out a Sentinel's like chest and then drive it around because it's like, yeah, sure, you pull on these cords inside, and that will help me like use the blasters and stuff. So we get that. We get Gambit like charging Wolverine. We get Morph like having multiple instances of being able to really like embody all of these other heroes. And it's a great little trick to have Morph be the in-between so that, hey, we get to see Archangel, we get to see Psylocke, we get to see Blob, we get to see Shatterstar, we get to see, Silver Samurai, like all these other characters that are popping up just through Morph is a great little like way to tool in some Easter eggs throughout the story. And so like if this is the first episode, I'm completely on board. And then at the end, hey, Magna Daddy's here, and he needs to let everybody know. The first time I watched this, I was like, whoa, okay, Magneto's a choice here. And I love it. He shows up. I'm like, is he wearing eyeliner? He might be. I mean, he's Magneto, whatever. But
Hmm.
we find out that he is now in charge of the X-Men per Charles's will at the end of episode 1. So we're sort of introduced to this awesome X-Men team. Cyclops has sort of inherited the mantle of leader. And then at the last second, your arch nemesis is in Charles's office. And he's like, here, read the will, you idiots. Like, Charles gave it to me because he loves me and he doesn't love you. So now all of you work for me.
Hmm. It's great. It's a great, cliffhanger.
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty wonderful and a cool way to introduce, like, again, like all of the struggle between ideologies and showing how Magneto is willing to at least try to face that there are more than one ways of doing things. So it's great. We didn't mention who the X-Men save in the beginning. Roberto da Costa, he becomes, I can't remember his mutant name later on.
Sunspot.
Sunspot. He becomes Sunspot. And he's kind of how you were mentioning throughout all the films. There's all these characters in flux, right?
Yeah.
Struggling with their identity and their position on the team and their position in the world. Everyone has that all figured out except for Roberto. And he's like a rich kid who he ends up leaving, and they need to track him down because the people are still after him. Um but yeah, other than that, pretty great episode, great introductions, and not an hour long.
Yeah.
Imagine
Like
that.
24, 25 minutes. And they pack so much in there. And yeah, so I mean, Roberto gives us access to sort of like Jubilee and the younger X-Men
Yeah.
as like that part of the story where he's torn between, hey, I just like being a rich sort of Brazilian kid who's the heir to probably like a sugarcane fortune or something. He's from the richest family in Brazil. He doesn't really want to be a mutant. He likes partying and clubbing and just being a
Hmm.
regular person. And so he's not really wrapped his mind around the idea that you are being hunted. I get that this was only real for you this one time and we stepped in and saved you. But like as soon as you leave again, like you're being hunted again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like really nailing home that concept, I think was important because you have to have the viewers and the characters understand that like we're basically teetering on war at this point and you are being hunted to extinction. So you can go out there and die or stay with us. And let me ask you this before we move on to episode 2. There are some boundary violations in this show. And one of them begins with the X-Men kidnapping Roberto. They're like, well, we saved you. And he's like, wait, so you're kidnapping me now?
Yes. Yes.
They kidnap him. There's
Yeah.
no sugarcoating that. I mean, they do it with his longevity in mind, but he
Yeah.
is kidnapped. And when they go to see Gyrick in the prison, Scott's talking to him. He wants like a confession or something like that. And then he's like, oh, well, you haven't met my wife. And then Jean mind rapes him in prison.
Mhm.
And it's like another huge boundary violation. So I found it interesting that we have like the X-Men as a persecuted class who are being hunted and are rightfully pissed. And then the way that they go about using their authority, sort of they act unilaterally without considerations for those type of things. And it's not like Guy Ritchie didn't deserve it, but at the same time, like you're sort of proving his point that
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that there's somebody out there that could literally just take over your body. Like if you and I are having this conversation, all of a sudden it's like, nope, you're a prisoner in your own body and I'm talking through your mouth. Like that's a major personal violation. And I feel like that is something that gets echoed in subsequent episodes as well.
Yeah. I mean, the way of American mythology is a strong but good person will always do what's right when the chips are down. If you have those two things combined, kind of no matter what they do is wrong. And one of the problems with the MCU is they tried to tackle that over multiple films of, well, what is the fallout of these actions? And it turned out to be like the most boring stuff in all of the movies. And not that that's not something to discuss and contemplate, but I feel like a lot of kind of like counter superhero programming like Invincible and The Boys and Watchmen, it has kind of become like the only thing that people are interested in. It's like, well, what about this and what about that? And these X-Men don't care about. They're just like,
take it up with our lawyers.
yeah, basically, which is what happens. Next episode is Mr. Magneto goes to Washington.
That's right. Oh my God, such a great way to phrase it and jump into episode 2. Thank you for checking out the show and becoming an X-Friend. Hopefully, you'll join us on our journey through X-Men 97 and beyond. X-Friends is a Movie Friends and Bad Movies We Love co-production and part of the Scheist Podcast Network, hosted by Seth Vargas and Nick Scheist. You can find our contact info and socials in the show notes, and you can email the show directly at xfriends@thescheist.com. That's the letter X, friends@thescheist.com. So until next time, mutant and proud.